This particular reading is on the life of Pamela Kelley Berkeley, and it's going to rely on passages from Maureen Callahan's book Ask Not, as well as the 2 features published in People magazine on her life, as well as reporting done by Cape Cod Times, the New York Times, and Washington Post. I spent my whole life as a disabled person doing good things and being a good person and self-reliant. I want to say something because I've made something out of my life. I am proud of what I did. I rose to the occasion, said Pamela Kelley Berkeley to Liz McNeil in an interview published in People magazine. The facts of the case are as follows. On 13th of August 1973, 18-year-old Pamela M. Kelley had just graduated and was dating a Kennedy, 17-year-old David, one of Robert and Ethel Kennedy's 11 children. She and her sister, Kim Marie Kelley, and David hopped with 3 friends on a jeep which was driven by David's older brother, 20-year-old Joseph, for a trip to the nearby beach in Nantucket, Massachusetts, for summer fun. On the way back, Joseph took the so-called shortcut down on an irregular pathway, lost control of the jeep because of speed, swerving at an intersection of Polpis Road, resulting in the jeep flipping over, throwing everyone overboard. Joseph was uninjured, while passengers other than Pamela had minor cuts and bruises or neck and leg injuries that healed in a day or 2. Everyone except Pamela got released from hospital quickly. Pamela didn't, because in the impact of the crash, as Callahan menacingly writes on page 176 of the book, she had been thrown 30 feet in the air before hitting a tree stump, rendering her paralyzed from the neck down. New York Times downplayed the accident and its aftermath in its reporting. For example, in its 14th August 1973 publication, the small line heading the news report on page 25 was, "Robert Kennedy's son among 6 injured when Jeep overturned." Now, by making the headline about David Kennedy's injury, which was a sprained back, nothing more, a passive-aggressive way to show Kennedy victimhood while not acknowledging the cause of the accident, was reckless speeding by his own brother, another Kennedy's son, Joseph Jr., Jeep did not overturn by itself, and the fact that a girl was paralyzed as a result of this accident. Now back to Callahan's book, page 178. Her mother delivered the news. She told Pam she would never walk again, that the doctors said she would never have children, and that she probably wouldn't live past the age of 40. Pam didn't say a word. Tears spilled down her face. 2 weeks earlier, her whole life lay ahead of her. Now she was in a hospital bed, shivering under ice packs meant to relieve her back spasms. She would never go to the bathroom normally again. Her world would be wheelchairs and physical therapy and catheters. As indicated in the New York Times report, a hearing into the accident had been scheduled in Nantucket District Court 6 days after the accident, because the Nantucket police had issued a summons to Joseph Kennedy for, quote, operating negligently so that the lives and safety of the public might be endangered, unquote. Coming back to the book, page 180. 6 days after the accident, Joe Kennedy was in Nantucket District Court, standing before Judge George Anastos, a college classmate of his late uncle Joseph Kennedy, who had been killed in the war. There Joe sat, inexpressive and emotionless, as witnesses and drivers testified that Joe had been driving in the wrong lane and speeding while kids were standing up and hanging out of the Jeep. Joe pled not guilty, even though he had told the police that the accident was all his fault. His mother Ethel was in the small Nantucket courthouse, as was his uncle Ted. The judge turned to Joe. "Do you believe that prison sentences deter automobile accidents?" the judge asked. "I don't think so," Joe said. "I think that someone getting seriously hurt would be more of a deterrent. 4 of his 7 passengers had been gravely injured. You had a great father and you have a great mother," Anastos said. "Use your illustrious name as an asset instead of coming into court like this." He gave Joe a $100 fine and let him go. It was quick and tidy, both in court and the press. As a side note, I will say over here that technically if he was at fault for causing the accident, Why was his punishment just a $100 fine? His uncle, Ted Kennedy, had gotten away with just pleading guilty to leaving the scene of an accident in 1969 without any criminal or civil liability in a case where he had more control over the outcome as a 37-year-old than the 20-year-old Joseph Kennedy. Ted Kennedy got re-elected for the remainder of his life as a senator representing Massachusetts in Washington. Joseph Kennedy just had to ignore Pamela Kelley's health condition for the rest of his life. Interestingly, in the Mary Jo Kopechne case, it was the insurance payout from the maker of the automobile that was given to Mr. and Mrs. Kopechne as a settlement. Something similar was reached in the case of Pamela Kelley. Page 180. In the end, neither Pam nor the Kelleys sued Joe and regretted the decision to not have something in writing to secure their daughter's lifelong medical care. They settled instead with the company that had insured the Jeep and used the $668,000 to buy a large high-end house with a swimming pool and a tennis court. It overlooked a big pond and was a permanent reminder of all the things Pam could no longer do. In public, Pam was all cheer, a brave face. In private, Pam was shattered. She had to use a catheter to urinate. She had to take suppositories to have bowel movements. Her mother had to roll her over to prevent bed sores. Pam dreaded falling and had to learn how to pick herself up, more than half her body now dead weight. In those first 2 years, Pam would hole up in her room and throw things at the wall, at her siblings. She cried night after night, loudly enough for the whole family to hear. She would say it out loud, "I want to die." Callahan's book goes on to mention what happened to David. On pages 180 to 182, meanwhile, David, already a drug user, slid deeper into his addiction. After Pam, his next big relationship was with the starlet Rachel Ward, who did not recognize marks on David's arms for what they were, tracks from shooting heroin 5 times a day. And so it came to pass that the Washington Post, in its 26th April 1984 edition, published the following news. Family tragedy continues. David Anthony Kennedy, 28, the troubled son of the late Robert F. Kennedy, was found dead yesterday in a hotel room in Palm Beach, with suspected overdose of cocaine and prescription painkiller and an alcoholic stupor. However, despite her severe disability, Pamela M. Kelley went on to have a full life, as shared in the article written by Cynthia McCormick, published on the site of Cape Cod Times on 2nd December 2020. She went on to have a married life as Pamela Kelley Berkeley. She had a daughter Paige through C-section and had 2 grandsons. She had 4 siblings and caring parents. She was the founding member and executive director of CORD, which stands for Cape Organization for the Rights of the Disabled. One of the examples of her disability activism is shared in the Cape Cod Times article. Quote, to demonstrate the impossibility of crossing Main Street in Falmouth in the 1980s, Berkeley joined a traffic jam of people in wheelchairs that stretched across the roadway, Bill Henning said, who is now executive director of the Boston Center for Independent Living. Falmouth agreed to put in curb cuts, unquote. Now, even though this life was not one of her choosing, she made the best of a very bad situation and made something of herself. Her life had meaning and purpose, unlike that of David Kennedy. But all was not rosy in her life, as seen in the People magazine article dated 3rd December 2020, written by Liz McNeil, in which her sister Karen Kelley recounts the various challenges Pamela endured in the last 15 years of her life: recurring bladder cancer, spasms, chronic chest and shoulder pain, and financial difficulties. To get more insight into the financial difficulties, let's go back to Maureen Callahan's book. Page 183. Even though it was not in her nature, Pamela went to the press in 2005 to complain about the lack of financial support from him. And Joe, who had recently left Congress to return to the energy company that he had founded before entering politics, was shamed into giving Pamela help a little over $2,000 a month, later up to $2,500 per month. Over 47 years, Joe, who by 2005 had amassed a real estate portfolio worth $2 million, had given Pam $50,000 in total. It wasn't nearly enough. Her father had made bad investments and later on sold the $668,000 house bought by the insurance payout, and Pamela had to buy her sister Karen's house for $75,000, but she struggled to keep up the mortgage payments. And in 2019, she faced bankruptcy and the loss of her home. This is given in detail in the People magazine article. That's when she again spoke to People magazine in 2019, a year before her death. "I don't want to be mean about it because that's not me," she told People, "but I am so disappointed and I am so hurt." Back to Callahan's book, page 319. Pamela Kelley Berkeley died on November 20th, 2020, at age 65. She spent her last months in a Cape Cod nursing home during the COVID pandemic, suffering from loneliness and depression. She developed a bed sore so painful that she couldn't use her wheelchair, a result her family believes of shoddy care. Her daughter Paige told People, "In the last year, she had non-stop health problems and we could not afford the new equipment, a new bed and chair, she needed. She was just trying to be there for me and the kids and we moved in with her." When Pam died in November, both her sister Karen and her daughter Paige were by her side. "She knew we were there for the last few hours," says her sister, fighting back tears. Speaking with People magazine, in an article published before, Pamela Kelley Berkeley had said that she had suffered, yes, and that she had survived. Quote, "I spent my whole life as a disabled person doing good things and being a good person and self-reliant," she said. "I want to say something because I've made something out of my life. I only asked for money when I needed it. That's just the way I am. I am proud of what I did. I rose to the occasion." Which Joseph Kennedy, seen here in crutches, on August 1st, 2019 at a charity event for his energy company, did not.